Hello, welcome to Oak Farm, 2 acre gård in Sweden. Clearly winter, it's a balmy -5. I think it's way too warm for this time of year. No surprises there, I suppose. In between many other tasks that we can still do in winter, we're going to try and make compost today. Starting today. Last year, which was our first full year on the farm, I managed to make altogether maybe 4,000 litres of compost. I should be fair actually and say more like from 4,000 litres of raw material I managed to make between 2,500 and 3,000 litres of compost. Not too bad, and used up most of it. What's left of it is here in this tiny pile, and there's a larger pile of maybe just a bit over 1,000 litres waiting for the hugel beds just in front of the guest cabin over there. There's going to be a whole intricate maze almost of hugel beds there. Start of the work will be this spring. We'd hoped a bit earlier, but that didn't work out. But yeah, so we need many thousands of litres of compost next year, and this little pile here, raw material wise, that will be, gosh, hard to say. That might be about 3,000 litres of raw material. Pretty cold, as you can see. The surface is straw and hay mixed with duck, mostly duck, and some chicken poop in fairly ideal amounts, I would imagine, and that is what I think went wrong last year when I tried it in winter. The amounts of nitrogen and carbon in respect to each other were probably quite off. Now this is, I didn't intend actually to make compost this winter. I thought I'd wait until spring, where it would be a bit easier then. And also we've got a huge pile, many thousands of litres probably, of cow manure coming in from a neighbouring cattle farmer. So I thought we wouldn't manage to get enough this winter, but with about 20 ducks and at the moment 7 chickens, many more inside hatching and just hatched, but the adults have gone down a bit for various reasons. But in fact, especially the ducks produce so much shit that it just piled up to this gigantic heap, which is further filled with kitchen scraps. Yeah, not so much garden waste. So it's mostly straw, hay, chicken and duck poop, bit of rabbit poop as well, and pee, and kitchen scraps, and bits and pieces of ducks and chickens that didn't make it. A few were taken by predators and we found remains, and we did kill 3 roosters and a male duck, and yeah, parts of it are in the heap as well. So it being almost by accident a rather, I think, ideal mix of ingredients, carbon, nitrogen wise, I think it's actually starting to compost quite a lot already. And one of the main reasons I think that is that in the very middle, seen from the top, the snow and the ice have melted. So I think it's actually generating quite a lot of heat already, despite it being fairly cold-ish at the moment. So what I'll do, I'll spend some time digging all that up and putting it on the snow here. And as I do that, I'll have a better idea of what it looks like, if it is indeed composting already. and if I should continue the effort. If it is worth the effort, if it is going well already, then I will follow the Berkeley method and or the method that's promoted by Geoff Lawton. Namely, putting it on the ground, mixing it well, which it probably already is after I've put it on the ground, and the moisture content will probably be okay as well. I'll have to see as I go. Once it's down, I'll leave it for, well, if it would be following the rules, it would be leaving it for 4 days and then turn it, and from then on turn it every second day. And by the end of, in theory, under the best circumstances, 18 days, it would be perfect compost. Now, the big question is, will it work? Do I have the correct mix? Are the circumstances all right? We'll have to see. All I need is this lovely, what do we call it? A compost fork or a potato fork. Might be a bit big for a potato fork, but having the teeth run that way instead of straight out is brilliant. It saves, you don't have to bend down with every fork you fill, every fork load you take. You can stay upright, and my back is complaining a little bit most of the time, so that's really, really good. The rake, eventually to rake all the loose material together and onto the heap at the end of the job. To work then. Okay, time to have a look. Definitely not frozen inside. Not steaming as much as I sort of hoped. You can see a few insects going around, and definitely some action going on there. It smells not so good, not too horrible either. It definitely smells of duck shit, and there's the smell of, the nicer smell of hay and orange. But it's logical that it smells because this has accumulated over, I don't know, maybe 4 months or something like that. And as it accumulated, the bottom will probably have started being anaerobic, and that means it stinks. Now that I'm opening it up, adding air to the mix, it will start being aerobic again, and that will, if all is well, do away with the smell. This is starting to look like compost, a tiny little bit. See many little insects crawling around. Maybe some fungi starting to work. I'll feel the temperature. Definitely not in the ballpark that you'd want it to be for hot composting, which is between 60 and 70 or 55 and 70 Celsius. So it's definitely warm. I would guess maybe something like 15-20 degrees, with again -5 out here. Sorry, the neighbour came by and I had to chat in Swedish for a bit. Tough and difficult as ever. Anyway, so far I took the top layer, which is obviously really mostly straw, hay and poop. and that's still quite loose and not much composting took place there. By taking that first, which is logical and the most easy to do, it will become the basis and the center of the new heap, and any bioactivity, composting activity that took place in the center of the old heap will then be transferred to the outside of the new heap and will be able to work its way into the as yet uncomposted material. Bit further into the process already. It's going to be a good sized heap, goodness. And with this forkful I notice this, which I can only imagine being fungi. Hyphen. That would be awesome, because they will play a very important role in the composting process. And them developing to that size in a winter heap, that's very promising. And yeah, if you work on compost, you really shouldn't be afraid of dirty hands. I'll feel the temperature again. Yeah, that's definitely warmer. That may be getting to 20 degrees, a bit more even. Yeah, going well. I put in some of the charcoal from the stove in the house. You might have heard of biochar. I'll try and put a link up to that with information on that below in the description. Charcoal, if used in this way, could be called biochar. It will do several things. At least, worst case scenario, this carbon will be sequestered within the compost in the soil, and it will be sequestered there for a long time. It takes carbon out of potentially the atmosphere. If we would have burned this further, all that carbon would have gone into the atmosphere, most of it anyway. There would have been some ashes, of course, but most would have turned into CO2. Now it's going into the ground, and best case, if you look at this structure under a microscope, the surface area is gigantic. What was it? Was a tablespoonful was a hectare or an acre in surface area. That's just off the top of my head, and I might be wildly off, but it's large, and all that could become habitat, substrate for microorganisms, which aid in not only the composting process but the whole soil bioactivity and the functioning of the soil. It will up the diversity and the density of life, soil life. That's best case. It might depend a bit, it may well depend a bit on the quality of the charcoal, or the biochar if you will. And this is simply formed in our big stove, and so it's not under perfect circumstances. If you intentionally make biochar, then I think, but I still have to look into this a lot, you have to get it to heat up to about 500 degrees Celsius and let it burn very cleanly, very hotly, and then stop all the oxygen coming in, so you get it burning down under hot circumstances without oxygen, something like that. Again, have to look this up. Steam! Steam coming out of the compost already in winter. It's been minus 22 already for a night, 2 or 3 nights in fact. This is going well, so perhaps if all goes really well, I can have this ready within 18 days. Now I forgot to mention, I should have done that in the start, why I am doing this. Why don't I let it compost as it is. Well, I mentioned one thing already. It will turn aerobic. Anaerobic, I mean. It will break down without oxygen, and in that case a lot of the nitrogen will actually gas off. And I think the evidence of that was clear in the little flue on top. Remember when we saw the snowy surface, snow-covered surface with one thawed area in the middle? Quite a lot of water vapor came out there, I suppose, but probably, yeah, from the smell, quite a bit of nitrogen as well. And again, by turning it now, adding oxygen to the whole mix again, that gassing off will become a lot less. One of the things that happens when nitrogen gases off, along with other gases, you lose volume. And nitrogen is a very important plant feed, soil feed as well. So you lose that if it goes up into the air. You just lose stuff that you could have had. I want a lot of litres, many litres of compost for the hugel beds and for some more simple no-dig beds on the ground. And if I lose about half of the volume that I have here, then that would be a waste. This fellow won't be happy that we disturbed him. Biodiversity in compost. That's the finished heap for now. It is big enough. How big? Did I estimate up to 3,000 litres? It's probably a bit less, but not far off, I think. 4 days time, we'll turn it. See you then.